Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Bibbity Bobbity Books. My name is Ellie and today I'm going to be talking about my spring TBR. So spring is finally here in the UK and I'm so happy about it. I love the spring season. It's probably my second favourite season after autumn. I'm not a fan of the winter obviously because it's cold and rainy and miserable. Aside from Christmas is great. And I'm not a big summer lover because I don't do well in the heat. But I absolutely love the spring because we get brighter days, longer days, the weather gets a little bit warmer, you don't have to wear a big coat or anything, but it's not too hot. We get the spring flowers coming out and you know, it just feels fresh and new and I just love this season. So yeah, I'm feeling very happy and positive. And so today I thought it would be fun to put together a spring TBR of books that I would like to get to this spring. If you don't know, I am a mood reader and I also am a bit of a seasonal reader, so I like to tailor my books to the season so that I can feel fully immersed in each season. So I do like to, where possible, kind of read books that help me to enjoy whatever season it is that I am in to its fullest. So today I'm going to talk about some books that I've got my eye on. I might not necessarily read all of these books, I might only read a few of them, I might read other ones I haven't mentioned on this list, but this is a pool of books that are high on my priority that I am eyeing up for this spring. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into my list. So the first book is one that I definitely am going to read this spring because I'm currently reading it, and that is The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. So I actually started this book today on Audible and I'm about 4 chapters in and I am already really loving this book. So much so that I've actually gone ahead and ordered a physical copy because I want one for my collection, and there have already been so many quotes that I really love and that have really resonated with me. So for that reason I really wanted a physical copy so I can actually tab and highlight those quotes that I really enjoy. But yeah, this is absolutely perfect for the spring. It's a standalone fantasy. I think it's young adult or it might be new adult. We follow our main character who's in her 20s and she is a honey witch and she decides to kind of abandon the life that society has set out for her, that she's expected to lead. You know, she's expected to marry and have kids and these things, but that's something that she hasn't ever really wanted for herself. She's never really felt like she fits in with the people around her, and then she discovers that she is actually a honey witch and she decides to go off with her grandmother to go to her cottage to learn witchcraft and to hone her powers basically. But that choice comes with a cost because no one can fall in love with a honey witch. So that's the premise of the story, and I do think there is a little bit of a sapphic romantic subplot to this story, but so far I've just been really enjoying the atmosphere that this book creates. The descriptions of nature are just absolutely gorgeous, and I just love how independent our main character is, how, you know, she's being true to herself and, you know, she's standing up for what she wants, and that's not easy to do, particularly when your family and everyone around you has this expectation of what you should or shouldn't do. It is really hard to then go against that and to advocate for yourself and your own wants and needs. So yeah, I really love that so far. Obviously I'm only 4 chapters in so far, but I am enjoying it, and I wanted to share with you one of my favourite quotes so far, just so you get an idea of some of the themes and also the writing style. So it says, Marigold, who's the main character, Marigold has grown up surrounded by the poets who propel the narrative. How romantic to die young, unstretched, unsullied, without ever outgrowing the part of the ingenue. But what happens when the girl keeps living? When she ages proudly and defiantly without abandoning imagination or stories or that secret wish to find magic wherever it hides. I love that quote. And there's another quote as well that I wrote down, which is, these are the wild women who run barefoot through the meadow, who teach songs to the birds, who howl at the moon together. Wild women are their own kind of magic. The next book that I'm definitely going to be reading in spring, because I have already started it, is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. So this is actually a reread for me. I read this one when it was first published quite a few years ago now, and I remember I really enjoyed it. And I've been meaning to read the second book, which is Heart of the Sun Warrior, for a really long time, but I knew that I had to reread the first book because I've honestly forgotten everything that happens. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to reread this one and then hopefully get to the second book. I can't remember if this is a duology or a trilogy, but I know that the first book is perfect for spring because it's set in the Celestial Kingdom, I think it's called. Basically this kingdom up in the clouds where immortals live, and the kingdom is described as eternal spring. So there are flowers blooming everywhere and it's just so beautiful and sumptuous and just absolutely stunning. So if you haven't heard of this one before, this is a young adult fantasy story with some romantic elements in there as well, and we follow our main character Xingyin, who is a young woman who lives on the moon with her mum. Her mum is the moon goddess, and she was actually exiled to the moon by the Celestial Empress because she stole the Emperor's elixir of immortality. And she was actually pregnant with Xingyin at the time when she was imprisoned on the moon, but the Empress didn't know that she was pregnant, so she had Xingyin in secret and she's kept her hidden away from the Celestial Empress for her own safety. But then one day when Xingyin is a bit older, she accidentally flares her magic, and that is detected by the Empress. And so the Empress comes to visit the moon and Xingyin is forced to flee her home, but before she leaves she makes a promise to one day return back to the moon to free her mother from her imprisonment. So that is the setup of the story. I love the mother-daughter dynamic in this story, and it's just so whimsical. I think the highlight is the writing. If you like really descriptive writing, then I think you'll really enjoy this one because it reads very dreamlike, very whimsical and very beautiful, and those are exactly the kind of vibes that I want for spring right now. So yeah, I'm enjoying my reread so far, and I'm looking forward to finally getting to the second book after I finish this one. The next book on my spring TBR is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Now, I always assumed that this would be a perfect book to read in autumn because it is a gothic classic. However, I recently heard Katie from Bambina Katerina talk about this book in her spring recommendations video, and she described the opening of this book as the epitome of spring. Apparently it contains lots of beautiful descriptions of nature and of the gardens, and she also pointed out that the central theme of this book is, you know, outward beauty and youth, and that is also associated with the spring. So yeah, I'm excited to give this one a try. It's been on my TBRs before. It's something that I've been meaning to read for a really long time and just haven't gravitated towards it yet, but maybe this will be the time and I'm excited. I am not a big classics reader, but the classics that I tend to be drawn to are gothic classics, so I think for that reason I will enjoy this one, especially if it has lots of descriptions of nature in it, because again, that's something that I really enjoy reading about. Of course, this is the famous story of Dorian Gray, who has this piece of artwork commissioned. It's a portrait of himself and it's magical, so the idea is that the portrait ages instead of himself so that he can stay young and handsome and beautiful forever. That's all I know about the story, but yeah, I'm excited to finally get to this one, and I need to just force myself to pick it up because I'm sure I will enjoy it once I start it. It's just purely because it's a classic that I'm intimidated by it and I just haven't been reaching for it, but hopefully I will in the next few months. The next book on my spring TBR list is The Tropic of Serpents by Marie Brennan. So this is book 2 in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series, which is a fantasy series that is pretty much what the title of the series suggests. It's a series of books that are written like memoirs. So this fictional natural historian called Lady Trent has basically gone ahead and written a series of memoirs documenting her time when she was younger, about her scientific discoveries and her research expeditions, and her particular area of interest is dragons, as the cover suggests. And I read the first book in this series, was it last year I think, and it made it onto my top 10 list. So I just really enjoyed the first book. I liked how it felt like the main character was a real person, and her voice really came through strongly in the first book. I loved how grounded this felt because it talks, you know, about science and about natural history. So yes, we are talking about dragons, which are of course fictional, but it's written in a way that makes it sound like they're real. So, you know, our main character is talking about her discoveries about these creatures, you know, their bone structures, what their wings are like, what their scales are like, and it all just makes it feel very exciting and very real. And it's also set in like a Regency era. I'm not sure exactly when, but it has that kind of almost like Jane Austen feel to it, which is also really fun. So yeah, I'm excited to get to this second book. It's not too long for a fantasy book, so these ones tend to be quite quick. There are also some illustrations in there which are fun, and I don't know, I think because these books just are quite slow and they tend to just follow our main character. She's going on these science expeditions and she's talking about discovering things and she's out in nature. I think all of those things make me feel like this is perfect for the spring season. So yeah, I'm really excited to get to the second book. The next book on my TBR is Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So this is actually an author that I have recently discovered, and I'm going back and reading their backlist. They have written an awful lot of books, so I've got a lot of catching up to do, but I think it's likely that I'll pick this one up fairly soon because I've already got it on my Kindle. It's also quite short, which is good because it's less intimidating. I am also interested to read this author's book called Cage of Souls, which I've heard fantastic things about. I also feel like that one might be a good one to pick up during the spring season, but it is quite a lot longer and I don't have a copy of it at the moment. So for that reason, I'm unlikely to get to it in the next few months, but I do have Elder Race, and this one also sounds like a lot of fun. It's only 200 pages or so, so it's nice and short. It's a novella, a science fiction novella, and it follows a woman called Linessie who is always getting in the way, and then a demon comes and starts wreaking havoc on the land, and so Linessie decides to make a pact with an elder sorcerer who lives in a tower. But it says on the description online, Elder Near isn't a sorcerer and he's forbidden to help, and his knowledge of science tells him that there cannot possibly be a demon. So I think the idea is that advanced technology and science is indistinguishable from magic, and I think that's a really interesting theme to discuss in a fantasy sci-fi novella, and I think that would be a fun one to pick up if it's a nice sunny day and I want to go outside and just read something quick while I'm sitting out in the garden. The next book on my spring TBR is the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. So I read the first book, which is the 5th season, last year, and it made it onto my top 10 list for 2024. So I am very excited to continue on with this series with the second book. So I think these books are perfect to read in the spring season because of the setting. So these books take place on a planet that is ravaged by these storms every so often. They're called seasons when they happen, and they basically just destroy the environment. And so the society of people who live on this planet have to kind of build up from the rubble again each time one of these seasons occurs. So it's got an apocalyptic type feel, but there's also a type of magic in this fantasy series which is like a elemental kind of magic, where there's a group of people called Origins who can manipulate the earth. And so all of those things just make me think of spring. You know, you've got this vulnerable, volatile environment, and you've got these people with these powers to do things like move rock and quell earthquakes and things like that. So I think kind of like the nature elements to this story make me think of spring. The first book was really interesting in the way that it's written because it has some unique perspectives. I will say though that the first book, and probably the books going forwards, do deal with some heavy topics as well, particularly themes of oppression, so do please check out trigger warnings before jumping into this series. But I thought the first book was so unique. It was like nothing else that I've read before in the fantasy genre, and so I'm very excited to continue on with my experience and to be back in this world and to see what happens next. Okay, I've also added A Psalm for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers onto my spring TBR. This would actually be a reread. I read this little novella quite a long time ago now. It was a fair few years ago, and I remember I absolutely loved it. And Becky Chambers is now a favourite author of mine. I've read all of her books, I think, so far. And yeah, I just love this little story, and it's about time that I give it a reread, and spring is definitely the perfect season to read this little novella. Again, it's going to be perfect to have a shorter book on my TBR that I can just pick up if it's a nice sunny day outside and I want to go outside and do some reading and sit in the garden, because, you know, it's nice and quick and easy. And yeah, so this one follows a tea monk, a travelling tea monk who ends up meeting a robot when they're out travelling through the forest, I think it is. And this is the first time that a human and a robot have interacted in millennia. Basically, in this world a long time ago, robots separated themselves from humanity and they've lived separately from each other, but this is the first time that the two have come together, and we follow, you know, this tea monk and this robot as they travel together for a little while and as they get to know each other. And I think the robot is very keen to know what humans need, I think it is. He's got this burning desire to understand what do people need. And of course that is a complicated question and is difficult to answer. And what I loved about this story is that it is just so gentle, but also so optimistic as well. And I just loved following along with these two characters as they have philosophical discussions about the meaning of life, what it means to be a person, what it means to be alive, and they discuss nature as well. You know, they're walking through the wilderness and they are admiring, you know, the world that they are in together and the beauty of the simple things. And it's just such a charming, cozy story with a lot of heart. And I just remember absolutely loving it the first time. So yeah, like I say, I'm much overdue a reread of this one. Okay, and the final book that I have on my spring TBR list this year is one that I'm not too sure about, but it has caught my attention, and that is The Rainfall Market. So this is a fantasy novel originally written in the Korean, and it was written by Yo Young Wang. And I think it was the cover that really struck me first and foremost, and it made me think of like April showers. So I think that's the reason why I have like gravitated towards it for the spring season. And it sounds like it's a very magical and delightful tale, but I have also heard a few people talking about this book and saying that it leans quite young, so I'm not sure if I'm necessarily the target audience for this one, which is why I haven't actually gone out and bought a copy or got one for my Kindle or anything, because I'm not sure if it's going to necessarily work for me. That being said, I do sometimes enjoy middle grade stories. I do sometimes enjoy YA, but they can be a little bit hit and miss. So I'd love to know your thoughts if you've read this story. Do you think that I would enjoy it? Do you think it's worth me finding a copy or maybe getting a copy from my library or something? Or do you think it's, you know, best to leave it be if it's not targeted at adults? I don't know. Anyway, the premise sounds really magical and whimsical and a delight. So the idea is that once a year a rainfall market magically appears, and for the duration of the rainy season, if you've been specially invited, you can enter and choose a new life. And I think that in this story we follow a young girl who has a very difficult life, and then she ends up getting a golden ticket which would allow her entry into this rainfall market, and I guess we find out whether or not she chooses a new life. So yeah, sounds like a whimsical, magical time. It sounds like it might also have some interesting themes in there as well, which might give it a little bit more weight, but I don't know. So like I said, if you've read that one, please do let me know if you think that I should give it a go or not. And yeah, I think that brings me to the end of this spring TBR list. As I said, I might add books to this list. I might not necessarily read all of these, but these are a selection that I've got my eye on that I might be pulling from over the next few months. If there's any that I've spoken about today that you want me to prioritise, please let me know in the comment section. Also let me know if you've read any of them before and what your thoughts were, because I'd love to have a little chat with you in the comment section down below. I hope that you are all doing very, very well, and I'm sending you all so much love. And yeah, as always, don't forget to like this video if you did like it, subscribe if you want to see some more from me, and I guess I'll see you next time with another video. Bye!